It's the Human First AI Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Montague at Avenue 9. My guest this week is Dan Nestle from Inquisitive Communications. You can find them at b-inquisitive.com. And I'm excited for this conversation, Dan, because you and I are both content people and communications people. I got my college degree in communication theory and human relations and did a lot of PR classes because I could cheat and take broadcasting classes to be on the radio, but not end up with a worthless media broadcasting degree. How about you? Where did you start?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on the show, Mike. This is incredible. I've been looking at your stuff and listening to your podcasts, and maybe you should have gone to broadcast school. I mean, or got that degree because I don't think it would have been useless to you. You know, you have that kind of mellifluous tonality to your voice, and you got this really cool conversational style. So I'm pretty excited to be here. But yeah, I didn't go the academic route like you did, and in fact, I sort of cheated my way into content and marketing and comms, and if you want to call it that. And I just found myself in it 20 something years ago without knowing I was in it. And right at the beginning of what is now modern digital content marketing, and then into comms and to PR, and sort of mished it all together. And it's been a hell of a journey, and I've really enjoyed it, but I started off just like trying to figure out what to do with life. I was in Japan at the time. I lived in Japan for 16 years. And early on, sort of midway through my Japan journey, I had been working at these big companies and in areas that were definitely not, I mean, I was doing a decent job, but they were not lighting my fire. You know what I'm saying? So I just figured the only skill that I actually had at the time was that I could write. And I knew I was a good writer. I just was never battle tested. So I got some business cards printed up, said I was a copywriter, and nice. Started my own company. Back in those days, especially in Japan, you could just like hand out business cards and say, "This is who I am," and they believe you. And that's why I cheated my way in, But yeah, some people hired me, and turns out I could do the work, and that sort of started me on that journey. And then a few years later, I found myself back in the corporate world, but in marketing and comms role, and New Rules of Marketing PR came out at that time, and just changed the landscape. And ever since then, I've been really excited about all these new developments and how we get our message and our content when we deserve to get it in front of people, how we get in front of people, and how do we earn the right to get it in front of people. And,
I'm excited about this conversation because I think it has changed a lot. I'm guessing you and I are of similar age, and we're both these very empathetic communicators. I was the opposite. I was not a writer. I grew up dyslexic and getting, average scores in English and everything. And it wasn't until college and spell check and stuff. And some of those journalism classes where the teacher said like, "Hey, you can write. We got editors to fix the spelling. Don't worry about that." Like,
oh, terrific.
I can get any nerd to spell check and grammar check this, but I need somebody who can tell a story and somebody that can hear the music in the words of what we're trying to communicate and stuff. And I was like, oh, okay, this is a thing. And that brings us to our topic of AI marketing, because now I feel like of any job, if I had to pick one that was most endangered by LLMs, I would probably pick copywriters.
For sure.
And I think it goes, just like with any job, sure, not good ones, or, people that are really great, like Stephen King's not, going out of business because ChatGPT can write a horror novel or something, right? But I think bad copywriters or entry-level ones could be in a lot of trouble, right? So
much.
Where do you see this in your career? And I think we need to start this conversation talking about like, how do we leverage AI to make our job easier without becoming robotic and keeping our empathetic communication that we have?
Well, for sure. And the answer, I think, to all of this is in the title of the show, Human First AI Marketing. And when you are removing the human from the equation, you better really have a killer solution to reach the audiences that you want to reach and tell stories which I don't think really exists yet. And no matter how good ChatGPT or any of the LLMs are, you're not going to create I suppose a standout story is maybe the best way to describe it, or a really compelling story. Certainly not one that's going to withstand pressure tests and time. But as in regards to like how people who make their living from words are kind of going to deal with all this, and how brands and organizations are kind of embracing or not embracing this whole idea. I mean, it's a broad topic, but specifically here with writing, I think companies that think, or brands that think that, okay, I don't really need anything great. I just need to get the copy done. I just need to get the message out. Okay, fine. They can just tool around with AI, and it's going to put a lot of mediocre, middling, junior people, sadly, kind of not out of work, but they're going to have to look for different ways to prove their value or to create value.
Yeah.
Whereas I think real rich storytelling, organizations of all sizes that understand that they do have a story to tell, multiple stories to tell, that their narrative and their brand story and their messaging has to be, has to have a beginning, middle, and end, and has to have follow a journey. And, if you want to broaden the metaphor, it has to have a hero and a villain, and it has to have all kinds of different elements. Sure, you can use any of the tools available now to help along that journey and to help along that process of discovery and understanding what all those things could be and what works, what doesn't work. But you need a storyteller. You need somebody or people who have that innate grasp of how people react at the most basic level, emotionally, and certainly like from a psychological standpoint, how they react to different messages and what levers you need to pull and all that. And, we
got a lot to dig into here, because I kind of found like three threads that we could pull on here. I think the most interesting one, and if I just break this down to how I think about content, is even to put a good prompt into ChatGPT, you have to understand the stuff that you just outlined. Like what is who are we talking to? What's the audience? What are we trying to say? And then what's the structure and format of the messaging, and how are we going to distribute this messaging in a way to reach the person? There's still a lot of work, even if AI wrote all of the copy. And I'm not saying it should, but let's just say theoretically it could write whatever you asked it to write. You still need to ask, like, who are we writing this for? What is it for? What's the change we're trying to make? Like, how are we going to get this in front of people? There's still a lot of work to be done for that. And I think the second thread here for me is the title of your company, and Be Inquisitive. It really becomes, I think, and again, this might be going back to my journalistic background, but I think it shifts the job from being a good writer and communicator to being a good question asker, a good prompter, or somebody that can interview the founder, the client, the customer, whoever is the hero in the story, to get their story in a way that you can retell it is a powerful thing. Do you want to talk a little bit about why you picked Inquisitive?
You're piling on all these great things to talk about. We can start there with this whole idea of curiosity, right? And curiosity is, I think, for all of the time that I've been in business, nobody ever said, what we really need are curious people, right? And unless you were working in some sort of like innovation center or things like that, but you weren't seeing this kind of outward, like, people holding up a sign. What we really need is curiosity. And how do you test for that? How do you check off a job description that says curiosity is one of the top skills?
Yeah, I think that's why it's not on the job description.
That's why it's not on the job description. And it's in many ways, it's inimical to what the hiring process is and what HR stands for, and some of the compliance related kind of things that happen in organizations. So to be a curious person, and a truly curious person, is somewhat torturous, actually, going through the corporate world. It can be, you sort of always feel like you're boxed in, and then you get in the wrong environments, you get smacked down for asking questions when in fact that's just your nature because you're just curious, right? But to kind of bring it back to the point here, I think you're totally right that yes, you have to understand the basics or the kind of the solid building blocks of good writing, of a good story, what makes a good sentence, vocab, etc. All of that, like all the mechanics, all the things that we have been learning all our lives make good writing. Sure. Now we have to sort of have a little lateral move as writers and as professionals who are in marketing and communications. This lateral move is to say, okay, now I have to sort of figure out how to instruct a new partner in how to write and what makes good writing. And I have to just initially just use my own language to do it. So it's not that big. It's not hard to do, right? But then you start to realize that the more prescriptive I get, the more kind of context rich I can give, like the more context I can give, the more in depth I can understand my own thoughts and ask more and more questions, the better my partner is going to do with giving me the right answers. So you have to have a vision of what the good writing looks like, and you have to have an idea of what the story is, and you have to come loaded up with original thinking before you even start using the AI, if you want to get it to the place that really makes a difference or that is good quality, I suppose, for the task at hand. So, where that goes is, sure, you start to kind of understand how to prompt, and you understand, okay, that's okay. I understand. Yeah. I tell it to do this and it does this. Oh, but if I tweak the prompt, it'll do this. But it's not just the prompt. It's actually the interviewing afterwards. And you said how, people who can interview, the CEOs and so on. I think you need to interview the AI. You have to understand that your job after you prompt is just to keep the interview going until you are satisfied that you got the printable story that you're ready to run with, and it's all on the record. So those core skills of, okay, being a good writer and understanding what that writing looks like. Okay. That takes experience and wisdom. It also takes a sort of knowledge of what good writing is. And that curiosity, which is like, boy, this is going to make me want to ask more questions. What's the next question I could ask? And understanding that there's no question that's out of bounds now. There literally is no question that's out of bounds.
Yeah.
So you can just keep going and pushing and changing and iterating.
One of my favorite questions is to make ChatGPT ask me a question and say,
absolutely,
what do you need to know to be 90% confident that your output is going to be what I satisfactory or accomplish the goal that I'm trying to accomplish? And it'll ask me 8 questions that I can respond to then and fill out the story and provide the content. I think that collaboration and that back and forth is an important step people miss. They're still expecting the magic trick of like, hey, write me a press release, and then whatever it spits out is going to be the right thing the first time. And that's not really the way writing has ever worked, but it works with AI either.
And increasingly, of course, because the tools are available, they're getting cheaper and cheaper, and even companies that are developing their own in-house solutions, they're able to expand their capabilities because the cost of the API hits are getting lower. Yes, it means that they're going to be able to do more, create more content, but it also means that they're creating more generic slop that is posing as content. And look, there are some situations where that's okay, but it's never okay if you're talking about trying to reach an actual human person in a way that's going to persuade them, change their mind, convince them to move to the next step, to take action. Because you will lose out to the more powerful messages and the more powerful stories.
So I wanted to ask you that you went where I was going to go, which is the next thread, I think, is the changing role of content in our society. We went from a place 100 years ago where content was very scarce. We hardly had any images, no moving pictures, and very little audio and stuff. And that basically every conversation was a live conversation, to now we have unlimited channels. The variable cost of creating content is essentially zero. You can create 1,000 blog posts for slightly, more than, one blog post cost 2 years ago. So I think that really fundamentally changes maybe our AI and PR and content strategy. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
And how do you see this world changing? What can we do about it?
Well, just like anything else, there's an adoption curve. People are like, oh, I can do all this stuff. And then they're going to do the stuff. And then they're going to reap the unasked for consequences of the stuff, which is so much nonsense. And I said slop before, but just like generic stuff that's out there. Mark Schaefer, my friend and mentor, author supremo, he calls it the pandemic of dull, and I've heard it called AI slop. I think Martin Waxman said that, and it's true. Like, this is the problem that unlimited content capabilities gives you, and especially when you're in a decision making like position in a company, or you have budgets under you, you're like, all right, I can get a lot more for a lot less. Let's just keep pushing in that direction. So it's easy to fall into this trap. Now we are seeing this more and more in all different, in all different platforms. LinkedIn is cracking down on AI content as far as they know, and a lot of companies are certainly kind of being more careful about it and suspicious of it. And consumers, the people we're trying to reach, they're the ones who are most like, why, this is boring the hell out of me. And, or what's in, this is AI. They're getting it, right? They're understanding. So because it's kind of flipping in that other direction, now producers of content are in the position where they have to figure out the quality part. They got to figure out, what does that look like? And it certainly means kind of pulling back the volume a little bit, like stop producing so much stuff for no reason. It means getting more focused on your targeting. It's in some ways, it's actually the same best practices that marketers, communicators should always have had, which is to know your audience, know what they like, know what they want, know what they need, and know what you want them to do. So that's the first thing. The second thing is know where they are. Where are they? You understand where they are, then you understand, okay, if it's that platform, I'm going to write it this way. If it's email, I got to write it that way. Or if they're on YouTube all the time, oh shit, I'm doing video, right? So you have to understand these different things. And then, you have to understand all the other kind of qualities of these people, like what are their desires and what's the, do they like baseball or, this kind of stuff, so that you can start to work in the personalities and understand how that affects your stories. And those best kind of practices, or those things that we used to take for granted, they have to come back in a big way. But the bigger challenge now beyond that is I think the where question. So the fractured audience environment now, okay, fine. You understand who your audience is, I suppose, but I'll guarantee you it's a lot smaller of an audience than it ever was, because they're now all focused in this one particular place, or they're no longer hanging around on Facebook. I mean, who does? But they're no longer hanging around over there. Now they're over on some random Discord community, or they've given up altogether. They're out touching grass, and the only way that you can reach them is with a billboard on the side of the road. So, you have to really focus in and figure out who these people are and what drives them, and how you fit into that, not how you can fit them into you. And these are all like incredibly difficult questions. I mean, AI can help with some of that too, by the way. Like, you can use AI to do your research, and I think it's really powerful for people who are creating the message and creating the content to then take it to the other, take it to another level and start to really focus on the strategy, understand that you have a whole strategic toolkit, a team available to you, that at fingers touch reach for $20 a month that you've never had before. So you have no excuse actually to be putting out crap.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. It really led me to this idea that I've been focused on for the last year or so, which is if you take this to the extreme, like you said,
Mhm.
I can create more and more content. It needs to be more hyper personalized. And
Mhm.
these niche communities, I think, are going to get so small that they're going to get down to one person. That we're
Interesting.
going to end up thinking about like coming all the way from full circle to back where we were 100 years ago, where it's like, okay, maybe it doesn't need to be, it may actually need to be human to human in person,
Mhm.
because otherwise we won't even know if it's real. But
Yeah.
I think we're all in the next couple of years going to have our own algorithms where you're not
Mhm.
going to Facebook. We're already seeing where traffic from Google is down because people are using their AI to go directly and get the answer.
Mhm. Yeah.
If you play that out in a few years, everybody has their own AI. You can't advertise into their
Yeah.
AI and their private algorithm and stuff, or you can't mass message people anymore because they're not on YouTube. They're watching their own video filter, or like you said, maybe we're all out touching grass again. I would love that.
Yeah.
So to me, it really comes back to this idea of like hand-to-hand combat. How do we go out, find someone who
Yeah.
is our ideal target, have a conversation with them, and move them towards
Yeah.
qualifying or disqualifying an opportunity for us, and really kind of abandoning the idea of branding or mass marketing in the traditional
Yeah.
sense. I think some of those things can still apply, but
Yeah.
not
I think
maybe the
it's a,
direct marketing at scale we were doing.
yeah, I mean, I think the answer is always, it's always it depends situation. Certainly in the B2B world, this whole, the idea of being a one-to-one, creating one-to-one relationships. Again, we're going back. It's always been such. That's the way that, it's not one to many. It's one to very, very few as a B2B marketer. And you just have to reach the right one. It's just what are the levers that we can pull, and what are the kind of research that we can do? What's the data that we can look at to understand where that one person is or who that one person is? And that's changing on all ends and giving us more capability to do that. But if we know we're only looking for 5 people, then what is our content strategy to reach those 5 people? Is it to try to reach 500,000 and get a 0.001% conversion? I don't know if the math is right on that, but is that what our goal is? Or is it, what? We're not going to worry about channels, right? We're just going to locate,
People.
they're these people, or we're going to, we're going to have to do something inbound. They come to us, or, we understand who the circles of influence are. And, we design our strategies to reach the people they trust and the companies they trust, or we go strictly by referrals. Who knows? And all of those things, it's interesting how much of it probably will get outsourced to AI, kind of in the way that I think you're suggesting, if I'm hearing you correctly, is, I'm not going to go to the social media platform anymore necessarily. I'm just going to have an agent who's going to do all that scanning and stuff for me, and is going to say, here, these are the 3 things you need to look at today, Dan. Or,
Right.
Hey, I've curated these 7 videos for you. Which, by the way, is the way that I probably would love to use it. However,
Yeah.
as a curious person, I always want to go to the channel and sort of play around and look for stuff, but that's not everybody, right? So it's going to be challenging.
Yeah, different times and use cases too. You're right with it depends. That's a great line there. All right, last question for you on topic, and then I want to get your crazy predictions about the future. But you do workshops and training on kind of how to get the best out of generative AI, and I know we've been talking a lot about maybe the hazards or slop of AI, but
sure.
I think a great question for you is, how can we use AI to be better writers, better PR people and communicators?
Yeah, let's flip the script a little bit and stop talking about the dark side and start talking about, what is great about this for us, and why I'm leaning heavily into it. I mean, I've been a technophile for as long as I can remember, and I like the new stuff, but this is different in that anybody with a little bit of patience, an understanding of logic and critical thinking, and a lot of curiosity is really positioned to get, I think, exponential growth in their own personal, in their own career, and in their capabilities with the right use of AI. And it is an enhancer. It is an enabler. I like to use it as a research team, and as a help to help me with ideas or help me flesh out things, to pressure test stuff. I love the way that different tools can work together and I'm not talking about automation, although that does come into play sometimes, but I mean how you can use different tools and connect the dots yourself and really build on, a product from one, you take it to another one, you refine that product into something different. Then you go to another place and you're like, oh, I didn't know I could do this with that. And oh, wow, here's another input I can throw in. Let me go back to the beginning, because going back to the beginning is no longer like a huge Herculean effort anymore. You don't have to start with a blank page. You just build and build and build. And I think through that kind of, iteration and a lot of questioning, yeah, sure, maybe I'm not spending 5 hours on a 5-paragraph piece anymore, but I'll spend 5 hours on the 5-paragraph piece, because I'll be like, I will figure out, okay, here's where I can draft it. Oh, but here's another piece of research I can throw in. And here's more facts and figures that I can now use to back up and strengthen my argument. Right. And then when it's done, I always, and everybody should, you bring the human 100% back into the mix, and you write and revise as in your voice, all this stuff, just as if you had a team writing for you. It's no different. So,
yeah.
So, there's so much you can do as a content creator. And again, the research capabilities are crazy fantastic. I was listening to your previous show with Mike Buckby, and talking about, I think you guys were talking about deep research a little bit. I can't get enough of deep research and how they're advancing, especially on the Gemini version. I think is just incredible. But it gives you more and more to think about. So I might have started out, said, okay, I'm going to do a 5-paragraph piece, but at the end of the day, I might have 7 5-paragraph pieces or there's beginnings of them. And that's something that I wouldn't have had before. I can use the AI as my content quality guide. I can, I'm not talking about editing. I'm talking about providing a very high serious set of criteria that is going to prevent me from producing slop. And I could build that into the prompts, right? I can try out different prompt frameworks, because they exist and there's loads of them. And if listeners out there are not using them, please go run, don't walk, run and find prompt frameworks. There's a lot of talk out there that prompting is going to go away. I do not think so. And I think that people who know how to prompt will always have a little bit of an advantage, at least until AGI or whatever, if that comes along, if it does. So look, it does so much. Then of course you have all the benefits for a business of productivity and efficiency, and cost reduction. Those go without saying. But what about developing your people? You want to have a team of people who can do incredible amounts of work. If you're the kind of organization that isn't boxing your teams in, or that isn't like operating in silos, that wants to break down silos, this is the opportunity for you right now. This is how you break down silos. So when I do the training and stuff in AI, like when I go out and do training sessions, most of the time it is, we just need the basics, because most companies aren't anywhere near even some of the things I'm just talking about. But when we talk about the basics, the eyes open wide as soon as you start talking about, it's not about using 4.0 versus Claude 3.7 versus, it's not about the tool. It's about your mind. It's about your mindset. It's about your approach, about how you talk to the AI. And once you sort of wrap your head around it, then we can start talking about, okay, this is how you talk to it. This is the prompting, right? Once you put that prompt in, then you're talking to it just like you are anybody else, who's like there to help you and be nice. All these things, like, it's incredible how the mind opens up. The other thing I'll say about the training part of this is, it's easy to get caught up in the tools. It's very easy to get caught up in, oh, it can do this, it can do that. And I've been talking about that for 5 minutes straight. But really where you need to start is your use cases. What do you need to do? What's the problem you're trying to solve? And then you invite AI to the table, as Ethan Mollick says, and you play. You play a lot. You do some no risk, low risk experimentation and start to work out how and where the AI tools can help you solve those problems. And so, you start with the use case, the problem first. You're going to eliminate some. So, no, AI can't help me with that. Or AI can really help me with this. So, once in the training, when people start working on those use cases, I mean, it's amazing if they leave after a couple hours and going, "Holy cow! I've just changed my week. What am I going to do every day?" Or,
I see that a lot.
How am I going to restructure or change my day? Or gosh, I'm going to be able to do my job so much better and faster. I can't tell my boss, stuff like that. That happens.
I think it's that big of a change. And
Massive,
you highlighted a few things for me that I think a lot of people miss. One is we get so focused on the output of generative AI that we forget that there are other types of AI. Mm-hmm. And I know one of your favorite tools, like Google Notebook, and
I love
you
Notebook
mentioned
LM.
deep research, and deep research is not really about the output that you're publishing. It's about getting input for your writing and your thought process and other stuff. And Notebook is really cool about collecting a wide variety of sources that human beings are just not good at that. We can't keep 50 entire books in our brain at one time, but the AI context window can now, and that's incredible.
Notebook LM, if I may, Mike, I mean, Notebook LM is, I mean, I am a huge fan, and I know it's not the only tool out there, and certainly it's going to get better, or it'll get worse, or there's other ones that are going to pop up. But, for the time being, that tool, that genius of a tool, has changed, I think, the entire approach, I think, to content creation. And it's presented, or it's giving us a way that we haven't really had before to create our own massive, huge libraries of data and information. And as long as there are no images, all this stuff that we've done for the past how many years is just sitting out there, like collecting digital dust. Well, now we can put it in a very safe location, and we can transform it. We can recreate. I'm not talking about repurpose. I'm talking about recreate, reimagine this body of work that you've already done, or that somebody else has done. Or, if you want a research project about a company, you can find everything that you can publicly available about that company. You create a notebook. Mike, you've gone for jobs before in the past. You've gone on job interviews, or you need to present something to your CEO, whatever it is. You have to do research. I'm telling you, just grab, 15 or 20 sources using Notebook LM, and you have saved yourself, 20 hours of work just trying to get the research. And now to say, okay, we're getting the Cliff Notes version of that's completely, I think, off base. You ask the right questions, you're going to get detailed answers. You're going to get the information that you need, the facts and figures to back it all up, and you'll be able to put together your research and your foundational information in a fraction of the time. And it'll be good. It'll be really good and very informative, and it'll help you.
Yeah. So, there's so many use cases for that. Yeah. I know, I'm getting older in my career, and I spent 15 years at one organization making content on the same topics. And you're like, I'm pretty sure I've written something on this before. And it's amazing to have AI now. I wish I had it for the last 15 years to go, oh, you already have a great take on this. You did the work, and you just forgot all about it because I did it, 8 years ago. we can now kind of store all those documents or pull them back out and say, hey, update this with modern research or with a different spin or for this use case. And all of a sudden we're elevating stuff that we've worked on that we don't now have to start from scratch, or we've forgotten more about topics than we remember it.
Yeah.
Once you get past a certain age, that it's a really cool time to be alive. And I think that's a cool way of talking about it. So we're running out of time here. I just wanted to ask you one more question about where you think it lands in the future. So our last question here is always the fun one. If you had to predict like 30 years out, do you think we're all on the beach enjoying life without work? Are we in creating art and stuff? Or are we in some sort of dystopian Matrix future? If you had to guess, what sci-fi movie do you think we'll end up in?
That is, it's extremely difficult to figure out like which way we're going, but I'm gonna lean toward The Expanse. Have you seen The Expanse? It's a series it's available on Amazon, but it's a series of books. It's a series of books written by James S.A. Corey, which is actually two people, Ty Frank and was it Abrams? Anyway, two guys. And it's a killer series. It's not nice necessarily, but the way that kind of the civilization on Earth sort of evolves, you have people who are, doing just the normal work of the day, but the normal work of the day is not necessarily needed anymore because you have automation and AI and everything. So you have to make room for people to grow, and pressure, like you need pressure valves on your society. So humanity, being who we are, has no choice but to expand outward. So begin by colonizing Mars, the moon, Mars, and then outward into the planet, to the asteroid belt, right? And it's kind of the not near, but not super distant sci-fi future, but it's maybe within a couple hundred years or so, and it's not like we've evolved to such a degree where things are getting better. No, humanity becomes just more different versions of what they are now, but it's a really mixed up society. The same old strifes that affect humanity continue to plague humanity. It's not such a stretch for us now to imagine the way that people get along or don't get along, why there are wars, why there aren't wars, and just the tribes become bigger. And, as we get out there, who knows what we're going to find. So I kind of think that's maybe, unfortunately, but that's kind of where we might be going. But I always see The Expanse as a sort of middle ground, like it's a place on the way to something even better and bigger. Like, I don't think we're going Star Trek, the Glorious Federation. I don't think we're going Terminator, right? Like I'm not dystopian about this. But I think we're in for an era or a few eras of struggle, but not necessarily destruction. And maybe I'm hedging the question a little bit, but
no, I think that's a fair answer. Somebody else said this recently too that made me think of a similar answer, is that I think we're putting or way too many people are putting all of the problems in the same bucket, and there's different types of problems. So there's problems where data can solve them and AI can solve them fairly easily that humans have not been able to do before. But there's also those messy ones, mentioned, war and love and stuff like that. And AI doesn't necessarily add to solving the problem of
not yet
angry people and people crazy in love and psychotic, breaks and stuff. So I think we're going to find that in the future, some things that we thought, are beyond our wild imagination, that we can generate food, or we could grow things, or we can do things, and that were really easy, and other things are going to be really hard problems to solve and really messy. And they may follow humanity for the end of time, because that's what's fundamental to being human. So that's cool.
Yeah.
Awesome way to wrap up. Dan, tell us how you can help us, or how we can help you with Inquisitive Communications, b-inquisitive.com.
Well, thanks, Mike. I mean, like Inquisitive Communications is my company that's out there to essentially enable, upgrade, accelerate AI for comms teams and marketing teams and even creators. There's, essentially 3 buckets. There's AI training we talked about. I do AI training. I do strategic communications consulting, being that I've been in that, that world for such a long time. And then content. I mean, content is the thing. What's the future of content? I'm actually right now building a framework and an engine to help us all reimagine, recreate, refurbish, who knows, all of the re's that you can think of to your existing content. You're sitting on a gold mine. You're not doing anything with it. I am here to be a miner and a mine designer and whatever you want to call it for you. So all of that good stuff. And I'm really focused on the future of communications. Come to my podcast, The Trending Communicator, where I meet with people like Mike and others who are really focused on the future. And I try to bring all that back into my consulting services and just sort of keep us moving forward.
Love it. Good stuff. Again, big thanks to our guest, Dan Nestle. And for Avenue 9, we help people with their marketing communications, and the content and strategy that they're creating there could be anything in your sales and marketing funnel. I like to say that I speak nerd and I also speak sales and marketing, which is rare. Usually, tech people are known for their communication skills, and communicating, how entertaining people are not known for their tech skills and their organization. So I'm happy to be your bridge in your organization between both. If you need help with that, reach out at avenue9.com. Until next time, keep going. Have fun, everybody.